Hello there, lovely folks at YouTube. Bren here. It feels like it's been a while. It probably hasn't, but it sure feels like it because things have been kind of crazy. I'm hoping the weather cooperates in making this video and that I don't get a sudden gust of wind that knocks over my tripod because it is definitely the season that corresponds with air. We've had a lot of wind, a lot of storms. But anyway, I wanted to come outside and try, while it's reasonably calm, to talk about this little guy right next to me here. This is my rosemary, okay? Rosemary is one of the most common kitchen garden herbs. The name actually comes from Latin rosmarinus. It means dew of the sea. It is native to the Mediterranean and particularly likes to grow on the Mediterranean seaside cliffs. As you can imagine, in that climate, it tends to be warm and it tends to be dry. This is a plant that will only overwinter in zones 7 and up. If you don't know your horticultural zone, that is something you can Google, definitely. I'll probably do another video on it at some point. It's on my bucket list, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But yeah, zone 7 and up. I live in zone 7 here. I can keep this out year-round. It could theoretically be planted in the ground here. However, I keep mine in a pot, as you can see. And the reason being is that rosemary also liking dry. It does not like to have wet feet. I have very heavy clay soil that tends to hang onto the water, and I've actually killed rosemary plants just by planting them in the ground. They got too wet over the winter, and they died. So mine now stays in a pot, and it's nice and happy. So this plant will bloom under the right conditions. This one hasn't bloomed for me yet, but I have had rosemaries that have bloomed in the past. When they bloom just really kind of depends on what type of climate you have. Blooms can be anything from white to pink to blue. And it has that sort of like, it's in that Lamiaceae family, which mint and salvia are both in. So it has that kind of like flower that looks like lips on it. So this is also a plant, excuse me, prefers full sun. So as much sun as you can give it. South-facing exposure if you can. Just give it as much sun as you can. If you have less than ideal conditions, it can still grow in shadier areas, but it really likes that sun. It also benefits best from regular shearing as well. So mine is getting fairly thick because I've been regularly cutting it back and harvesting it. It actually likes that, and it will grow out a bushier plant. If you don't shear it regularly, or it gets these kind of long, leggy looking things, go ahead, feel free to cut your rosemary. It's okay. It actually prefers it. So this plant can be propagated from seed, but it is very difficult to grow from seed. Most commonly, it's propagated from cuttings, where you just take a stem, you strip off the bottom leaves, stick it in soil or sand, keep it moist, and eventually that little branch will grow roots and make a whole new rosemary plant for you. So this is very widely used in cooking. I cook with mine all the time. I actually prefer the fresh to the dried for a lot of applications, just because the flavor it's different. It really is. And that's true with a lot of herbs. You find that the flavor is really different with the fresh and the dried. And I prefer the flavor of the fresh rosemary. You can also, like, after you take all the leaves off of the stems, you can save those stems. And I actually use those stems and the woody parts of the plant in my grill. Like when I want to just smoke something or, cook something on the grill that needs that smokiness. Rosemary is a very good plant to do that as well. As far as magical, this plant, oh my gosh, this plant does everything. I think of this plant as the magical multi-tool. You can use it in just about anything and everything. It has correspondences with both the sun and the planet Mercury. And of course, solar energy is just that big, happy, bringing empowerment into everything. And Mercury is that big communicator, opening pathways. So it's really good for anything with those correspondences. You can use it in baths, you can use it as incense, you can use it in spell bags and poppets, and of course this is a plant that is safe to ingest, either whole or in teas or tisanes. Most common associations with this plant are purification, consecration, and healing, especially when the plant is burned or used in a bath or wash. You can use it in a poppet or a spell bag for healing, to improve memory, It prevents nightmares. It's just a really good plant for just bringing in good energy to a situation. It is also sometimes used in love magic as well. In particular, love magic where you want to promote fidelity. This plant is also excellent to add to a floral bouquet for the deceased or on your Samhain altar. Again, just that, memory and remembrance of the dead is a really good association for this plant. And of course, its use in aiding concentration and memory just makes it a really good addition to any kind of ritual work that you're doing, just to kind of give you that oomph that you need. There's a little legend that I want to share about rosemary. I'm here in Virginia in the United States, and there's a legend here in Virginia that says that the first rosemary plant in Virginia was brought by a woman named Grace Sherwood. Grace Sherwood is also known as the Witch of Pungo, and she's one of the last people in the United States to be tried as a witch. The results were inconclusive. She was tried by ducking, and if you're not familiar with that, it basically means that they tie your thumbs to your toes and they throw you in water, and if you float, then you're guilty, and if you sink and drown, then you were innocent, which is an awful, awful way to go about trying somebody for witchcraft. But most of the witchcraft trials were fucking awful. But anyway, Grace Sherwood was tried for witchcraft. They ducked her, and she sunk and then freed herself from her bonds and swam back to the surface. So they couldn't figure out. They were like, well, what does that mean? They didn't know. So they just kind of said, okay, whatever, and we'll let you go. She did live to a good old age, from what I understand. Died of natural causes. The main reason she was tried as a witch, of course, was because she was a midwife and an herbal healer and outspoken and powerful woman, and you can't have that in 17th century United States. That's just not acceptable. But anyway, yes, she is very much associated with the plant rosemary. Legend has it that she brought over the first rosemary plants in Virginia. She kept them in an eggshell, is how the legend goes, and brought them over from England. And then if you ever go to Virginia Beach, Virginia, here in the United States, there are actually several areas that are named after her. There's Witch Duck Point, Witch Duck Road, etc., etc. Those are all named after Grace Sherwood. So that's what I always think of when I think of the rosemary plant. So yes, definitely has a lot of associations with witchcraft, in addition to just being a really great culinary herb. So I highly recommend that you add it to your garden. If you don't have an outdoor garden, it can be grown in pots, as you see. Just needs a little extra TLC, and make sure it doesn't get too wet. Okay? I hope this video finds you well. I hope you're all staying safe, and I will see you again soon.